Today we are interviewing Sigrah. He's based out of Portland, Oregon, but nailed down the sound of UK drum and bass. Fellow music producers will know just how hard this drum programming is. It takes a ton of practice and familiarity with the culture. This episode covers Ben's music and dives deep into sobriety and alcohol in the music scene. Follow Sigrah and Top Tier Underground. Enjoy.
I'm here with Ben, and do you pronounce it Sigrah?
Yeah. I pronounce it Sigrah, but you can pronounce it Sigrah. I've heard Sigrah. I've heard a bunch of different pronunciations. So there's no wrong way to say it.
Yeah, that's cool. Sigrah, it sounds kind of fancy, but and that's just your last name, Sigrah.
It actually has like no meaning at all. It's just my last name backwards.
So it's your last name backwards.
Yeah. So
I thought it was your last name.
Yeah. So I don't know. I do that online for like the purposes of like
anonymity.
Yeah, and anonymity. I don't know.
Whatever.
Yeah, but
we can twist tongues.
Yeah. But yeah, I just figure it's easiest to do that, with social media and all that stuff. So
yeah, totally. So what is your last name?
My last name's Hargis.
Because I was thinking like whatever Sigrah is backwards is still not normal.
Yeah.
That's an interesting last name. What is that? Do you know?
I want to say it's Scottish, but I mean, like, most of my like family lineage is like from Kentucky, and like from there it was like straight from Europe. So, but yeah, I'm almost positive it's Scottish.
Nice, that's cool. Well, I'm really stoked to talk to you because I love your music, and I've been like on the halftime train for like a few years, and it's really rare that I find someone that fucking nails it in the United States. Like
thank you, dude. Yeah,
you just nailed it, man. I'm like, your drum progression and programming is off the chain, and it's really commendable. Like, super commendable, because a lot of people try, and it just, I mean, I've tried, but it's hard, it's super complex.
Yeah, man. I was like as far as like music is concerned, like my first instrument was the drums.
Yeah.
So like it's basically, that's like, as far as like beat oriented music is concerned, like that's a lot of times like drums and bass is what carries a tune. So like I always just try to program my drums to be as like clean, and I like to get real technical with it, as far as like drum programming is concerned. And so like all my like classical training is just with percussion. So like when I was a kid in like elementary school and middle school, I played just all the percussion instruments in like band and stuff, and took lessons and all that good stuff. I never actually learned how to read like notation, like with music. I knew how to read rhythm in notation, but I never learned to read like notes for the most part. I did do some like music theory training in college, but beyond that, like it was funny. Like when I first started out in band, I was like, I hate reading music. Like this is dumb. I just wanted to play the drums. So they like started me off on like the bells, like basically like a xylophone.
Yeah.
And like it was just like a little 2-octave xylophone. And like, I was like, this is stupid. I just want to play the drums. And, I kind of like put in my work and all that stuff. And eventually I got put up to snare drum, and I was like, sweet, I'm finally on the snare drum. And like, then I got up to, like, toms and all that stuff. And then like timpani, and so, but I always hated reading music. And so I would just like memorize the pieces, for all like the school performances and stuff. And just, I would get in trouble because I would like deviate and like add my own rhythms in, and like like the instructor would always be like, that's really nice and it sounds good, but that's not how the piece goes. And so isn't
that like reminiscent of like what the entire education system is about?
Yeah, pretty much. Like, why don't you just like make sure you color in the lines, because it looks better that way, to the teacher or the instructor. I understand why, but at the same time, like, I'm somebody who just like the more you can express like creatively without bounds is obviously the best way to go about it for me anyways. But
Yeah. That's I agree. And it's kind of funny because I grew up playing the drums and have a similar story in the sense that I did take a lot of music classes when I was a kid, but I never wanted to like read theory, which I really regret now. I wish I would have learned it when I was younger, you know?
yeah, I definitely have some regrets when it comes to like not paying attention in theory class. Like
Yeah.
that's why I took it in college, is to like try and get better at it. I'm still pretty awful with music theory, and I write most of my music by ear.
Yeah.
I still know like the circle of fifths and like keys and chord progressions and things like that, but
Right.
that's about it.
Yeah. I know. I feel you on that. I'm 100% in that boat too. I mean, I still really don't even understand the circle of fifths. It's so bad. But I'm like, I'm learning though. I've been taking, well, actually Angel has been giving me some tutoring and that's been cool, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Angel's a good guy. He knows a lot about music too, so it's a good guy to learn from.
Yeah, he's such a funny dude.
Yeah, I love that guy. He is just
too.
like, he's a total nut.
Yeah, I love it. It's so rare that you meet someone that is just authentically themselves no matter what.
Uh-huh.
And it's
Yeah.
definitely how I try to be, you know, but I don't achieve it nearly as often as he does.
Yeah, I know. And it's like, yeah, somebody like Angel, he just, like you said, he's 100% authentic no matter what. And like, that's super rare with a lot of artists. You get a lot of artists who like put on this front. They're like, oh, I'm this tough guy, or like,
right.
I'm super dark and moody. And like,
yeah,
you know, like, I don't know, you can see the many sides of Angel in all of his music. And that's what I love about him. So like, he's inspiring me, like it's inspiring to me in that sense. Like, it's just like, you know, you don't have to stick to one sound or one exact, you know, style of music or you know, whatever.
Right.
So
yeah, I agree. So what got you into music? What got you into, you know, like what landed you into production, and did you start DJing first, or?
So like, as far as music is concerned, like I kind of strayed away from playing music when I was younger after like 8th grade. I started skateboarding more and like smoking tons of weed and like just being a shithead with my friends. And like, I was still loved music. And my, basically like I stumbled upon like drum and bass when I was like in 8th grade. One of my friends picked me up. He had his brother's car, and like he picked me up in his brother's car and was playing like an old Aphrodite like DJ mix.
Mm.
And I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, this is ridiculous. And he was like, oh dude, this is a drum and bass. Like, and I was like, what is drum and bass? Like, is that like a band? Like, like what is this? You know? You know, and I had found like weird, like I had found like weird abstract, like electronic music, like online before that, but it was never really something I paid attention to. But when I was kind of first introduced to drum and bass, like it was kind of like I'd gotten like bitten by a bug.
Yeah.
So from there, like, you know, I was listening to like drum and bass here and there between like a lot of the hip hop I used to like, and kind of stumbled upon like a lot of like early dubstep on like YouTube and shit. And once like this was like, yeah, like when YouTube was kind of like first like a thing, you know, I kind of stumbled upon like Vexed and like some old like Koki and like Mala and like even some like stateside guys like the Whittler. This was like back in like '08. So yeah, like '07, '08. And so like I just kind of like stumbled down this rabbit hole of like dubstep and drum and bass, and it's kind of how I like found myself like digging into like really just like broken beat music as far as like dance music is concerned.
Yeah.
With drum and bass, like the obvious appeal for me was like the drums. Like at first, like when I heard that stuff, I was like, oh my God, is somebody playing this? Like what the fuck? Like being a drummer and like being able to like play that fast is like, it's ridiculous. As far as like drumming is concerned, like in middle school, like when I kind of strayed away from like classical training and like being in like school band, I was like playing in punk bands. Um, and like, so that was kind of where I cut like my teeth as far as like a lot of like, you know, like faster rhythms and like, you know, weird like broken beats and time signatures and stuff like that was with like skate punk and like some, you know, hardcore stuff. And like, so like hearing that from a drummer standpoint, I was just like totally hooked. So, and then I found dubstep and it was like a slower tempo. That was when I was smoking a lot of weed. So I was like, oh, this is sick. Like, you know, like the low frequencies were like really appealing to me. I you know, had never heard like sub bass like designed like that, you know, like modulation and LFOs and like, you know, real like low hitting frequencies, you know, move through like, you know, kind of like the frequency spectrum like that before. And that was also something that just like totally hooked me.
Yeah. Okay, I hate to do this. Hang on just 1 second. I need to.
No, you're good, man. You're good.
Sorry, I feel like I was about to freaking choke. Needed water. So you're listening to dubstep, you're listening to drum and bass. Where was the transition from listening to writing?
So I had a friend show me Fruity Loops. This is probably like 2008, 2009. And like, we were just chilling at his house and like smoking weed. He was like, dude, I'm going to show you this. Like I found this. He thought it was like a video game. Because like the old fruit, like, yeah. So there were like those old PlayStation games, like Beatmaker Pro, and like, so there was like another Sony one, and they had like stems from like Timbaland and like Outkast and like other like pop songs, and you could like reassemble them and like remix your own shit or whatever. And I had like played those before, and so I saw that like Fruity Loops interface, and I was like, holy shit, like this looks like a fucking video game, like. And he had shown me like some amen breaks that he was like trying to like write like with the sequencer on there and like different sample like from the stock samples in Fruity Loops, and I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. And so he showed me Fruity Loops, and I was like, okay, that's cool. And I went home and I like downloaded a copy and like pirated it and was just like messing around with like the step sequencer. Because I had played those Sony games and they were nothing like what Fruity Loops was. And it's crazy. Like I just kind of started messing around with sounds. And yeah, this was like probably closer to like 2009, 2010 when I first started diving into like production. And like from there, I was just like kind of making like, I was just like trying to like find my legs, like with working the program. It wasn't until like, about 2010, I started DJing, you know, like started.
Sorry to interrupt you. At this point, were you in Portland or were you still in the Midwest?
Yeah. So I was still in the Midwest. I was in Kansas City. There's also a college town like outside of Kansas City called Lawrence. And there were a lot of like bass music and like dubstep and like electronic music shows. So I was like going to tons of shows and like, just like totally immersing myself in like the community there and like the whole scene and like, just going to all the shows that I could and like going to festivals and, just like really trying to like immerse myself in like this culture and this community. And I was just kind of like writing, you know, shitty beats, you know, like, like 64 bar loops and like, you know, playing around with like some of the stock synths and Fruity Loops and like trying to make like dubstep wobbles with LFOs and like really just trying to like experiment and emulate like what I was, you know, so in love with, which was a lot of like dubstep stuff. Then I started DJing. I like went off to college in some shitty little town in like the southeast corner of Kansas called Pittsburgh. And
Pittsburgh, Kansas.
Yeah, Pittsburgh, Kansas. Yeah. It's like this old like mining town and like there was a school there, and I was really into cars at the time as well. So I was like, I'm going to go to school for cars or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time I was just like DJing a bunch in my dorm room, like with a copy of like Virtual DJ and
Oh yeah, dude.
yeah,
That.
some shitty
Yeah.
some shitty little Behringer like rotary like all-in-one DJ controller thing.
Yeah.
And that's like just trying to learn how to beat match.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, so like it was probably around like 2010 where I really started to like kind of take it seriously and like learn how to beat match and like learn how to like structure a mix and like play tunes in a cohesive way. And I was still kind of like writing like little beats here and there, but it wasn't like production wasn't really serious for me until about like 2011 or so, probably about the next year after.
Okay.
So like basically with like my whole like career choice and things like that.
Which is
So,
what?
so at the time I was like going to school, like I said, for like cars.
Mechanics
I was going to be
or body or what?
automotive mechanics.
Okay.
And so basically when I was at school in 2011, my dad passed away. And my dad was like the one person in my life who was like always playing music. Didn't matter what it was, whether it was fucking Coltrane or like REO Speedwagon or fucking it didn't matter, like Led Zeppelin, you know, like he was always playing music. And so when I first started playing music, you know, I basically like snuck into his studio in my parents' house and like he had a drum set. And so I started like just banging on the drums and like that was kind of my first taste of playing the drums. But yeah, so he passed away and I kind of like found myself like kind of lost, like why am I going to school for like cars? This isn't really a huge interest to me anymore. It was something that like kind of got me through high school. You know, I was like kind of a student who struggled in high school, and I had a teacher who kind of like really helped push me through high school, you know, through like automotive mechanics and stuff like that. So I basically just had like a change of heart as far as like what I wanted to do. And after my dad passed away, I was like, okay, I really want to do music. Like that's kind of what he would want me to do. And
how'd your father pass away?
what's that?
How did your father pass away?
So yeah, funny enough. So my dad was an alcoholic, and he wound up homeless, and yeah, he passed away from liver failure.
Okay.
So which kind of ties into my story a little bit later, but
yeah, we'll get there,
and we'll get there. But
let's continue the timeline.
Yeah, exactly. So he passed away, and I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna like dive headfirst into this music shit. Like, I was fully immersed into like the scene that was happening in like Kansas City and Lawrence, and like going to every show I could, and like seeing all these, you know, touring DJs and producers, and I was just like completely inspired. So I finished out my second semester at school there, packed my shit. I moved back to Kansas City and back in with my parents. And I enrolled myself into a community college there for recording arts. And I was like, you know, maybe I'll work in a studio and like run sessions, or like maybe I'll, you know, do something with this. But basically, I just want to do this for myself. Like, I want to gain the knowledge of how to mix a tune down and like how to actually like, you know, manipulate audio and like, you know, really just kind of dive headfirst into this. So yeah, so I moved back to Kansas City, and I just, you know, dove in headfirst. I started like actually really learning Fruity Loops. It's funny, I still use Fruity Loops like to this day. A lot of people will like make the switch after their first program to like Ableton or Cubase or, you know, Pro Tools or whatever, but I've stayed in Fruity Loops just because it's the first program I learned, and it's what I know best. So I really just like dove headfirst into like the manual of Fruity Loops and like learned how to do as much as possible. And I would like take my sessions to school and like bounce them down to audio and like fuck with them on like the mix board at school and like, you know, mix them down there. And so yeah, so after I moved back to Kansas City, I just really, really dived into school, and I did 2 years of recording arts training at the school there. And that just like totally helped me like understand like audio and production and you know, mix downs and just the way a good tune should sound, you know.
Yeah, like how frequencies clash with each other and space
100%.
and placement and
oh yeah, and like the school I went to was a community college, but the instructors there were like extremely thorough for, you know, a 2-year program. For like most of a semester, 1 year, we did this training program called Golden Years, and literally it's like audio CDs, and they'll play you a section of a song, and they'll play you the same section of a song with like 500 hertz taken out, you know, in an EQ, and then it's like they've added distortion and reduced the attack on a compressor that was on the original sample, and you have to like be able to determine that with your ears. They test you on that shit, and it was probably the greatest thing I've ever done. Like,
yeah,
to go to school.
Yeah, your tunes are super clean. Your mix downs are phenomenal, man.
Thank you. So it was
some
just
of
like
the best mixes I've heard probably in a while. I mean, like like the thing with mixing is like, I mean, I've heard like, it's like kind of like how do you define best mix down, right? Because it's like you can get something that's really clean, but that mix shouldn't be clean for the track or something, you know, like
right.
It shouldn't be that type of clean for that track. And but what I mean by your mixes are perfect is like they're perfect for your genre. Like they sound, your mixes are like exactly how I want to hear that type of music. You know,
nice.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. And that's what I strive for.
Good. Yeah.
You know, like, thank you. And it was also at that point where I was like really like kind of finding out about like real sound systems, like sound systems that were designed for, you know, like low end frequencies and, you know, frequencies that you feel, not just hear. And like learning just the bottom register of the frequency spectrum, you know, and really diving into like the science behind, you know, waveforms and, you know, like where like good sub frequencies will hit on a system, really helped me like learn how to like, you know, really get down and like real precise with like where my sub was hitting, like where the kick was hitting, where the hats were sitting, where the, you know, the you know, the leads were sitting, you know, things like that. So yeah, like sound system music is like kind of the holy grail of like electronic music for me. Like I strive to make sure that my tunes just sound as good as possible on most systems, but in particular, you know, high quality sound systems. So that's like really where I focus like all my mix downs. It's like making sure the sub is going to hit well. You know, obviously you try to mix for every system out there, but you know, more so especially for the ones that hit.
Do you ever tune your tracks specifically for different releases? Like you can do a release that sounds good in like iPhone earbuds and then like mix it down a little bit different for when you're playing it out so that it hits, you know what I'm saying? Have you ever done that?
No, I definitely know what you're saying. I won't like bounce different versions. Really what I do in my mix down process is I will listen on like, you know, just regular iPhone earbuds, and then I'll listen on my monitors, and I'll listen in a car. And if I can, I'll test it on systems. You know, before I release a tune, you know, if I'm sound checking at a venue or whatever, I'll play a tune and stand in front of the system in the sweet spot or whatever, and really trying to understand how that tune is going to sound on most sound systems. So there are artists like Zeke Beats, for example, like as long as his tune sounds like decent on his MacBook, like, and he's tested it and referenced it on other systems and it sounds good to him, like if it sounds good on the MacBook, it's going to hit, like, which is pretty crazy. So I just try to reference in as many forms as possible, but I try not to get caught up in that because
but Zeke Beats is like such a different type of producer than you are, because
for sure,
like he has so much less going on with the with the percussions, you know, like for
definitely.
for you to have a clean mix with all your percussions that are going on, like you almost have to test it on a bunch of different things. Cause you know, like I mean, like Zeke Beats is amazing, but I mean, like he doesn't have nearly the same kind of percussion as and the sibilance that you're gonna get, you know, like is just so much different.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely kind of a different realm, but at the same time, like I kind of like really agree that if it sounds good on like, you know, a MacBook speaker, then it'll probably sound good on most things that you play it on. So, you know, with the exception of the low end, you're not going to hear that on a MacBook speaker, but
Right.
if you can get a good sense of how the rest of the tune is going to sound, then it's, you know, it'll sound good. So
yeah, totally.
definitely.
Cool. Well, so what got you out to Portland?
So I was living in Kansas City, and yeah, so basically, you know, I started working a lot with like the whole stylist crew out here in Portland,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, that's where I met Angel, and you know, like East Coast and Corey and all the stylist guys at Bleep Bloop and all of them. You know, most of them lived out here in Portland, with the exception of Angel, but. Yeah, so my soon-to-be wife and I were living in Casey, and we were like, you know, it's kind of time for something different. So we decided to move out here, and that was about 2 years ago now. So we're living here now, and we're actually getting ready to leave here in July.
For good or just temporarily?
So basically, my fiance and I, we are buying an RV. And we're going to travel North America for the foreseeable future and live in this RV. And, you know, we'll still both work jobs and be creative. And she runs a design studio, and I'll make beats and, you know, play shows and things like that. So we are leaving Portland. And as much as I love it here, I am excited to kind of get out and explore the U.S. quite a bit, you know, even more so than I've done in the past. So, but yeah, the scene out here in Portland is really awesome. You got like the Sublimate crew, and they do a bunch of stuff with like sound system music and you know, drum and bass and dubstep and like halftime and footwork artists all the time. So yeah, Portland is great. It's really awesome here. We really love it a lot, but just kind of time for the next chapter for us. So.
That's great. Yeah, man.
Yeah, man.
You can always go back.
Oh yeah. Like, and I like it here enough to where I could come back here easily, no sweat.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. So let's jump into your sobriety and kind of talk a little bit about that and how that came to be.
Yeah. So I have been sober for just under 9 months. Guess you could say my drug of choice is alcohol.
Lucky.
Yeah, right.
I'm totally kidding.
They've all got their quirks.
I'm just kidding. 100%.
Yeah. So basically, over the past like 4 years or so, I kind of started to see like some success with the music stuff, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
I started playing a lot more shows. Went on a tour, and just you know, as this lifestyle can be. You know, drug use and drinking are just kind of synonymous with this kind of scene or culture or community, whatever you want to call it. I mean, they are inherent with one and another. So, you know, I've definitely, you know, had my fair share of fun, and you know, basically it just kind of my drinking and drug use, it kind of all came to a head in the last year or so. It's kind of stopped being fun for me, and it was more so like a kind of a sad, depressing thing. So, you know, I was playing a lot more shows and like being on the road, doing some touring and things like that. And you know, with the tour, you find yourself like drinking every night. You have alcohol on your rider. Bar tabs that are endless, you know, so it can be kind of easy to overindulge. And I found myself doing that quite a bit. It got to the point where I was like, not as like an example of worse for the wear, but I would like have a hard night, like partying after a show or whatever. And whether I would sleep or not sleep, I would, go to the airport, like an hour early or whatever. And I would immediately go to the bar. Like, oh, I got this flight. So time to hit the bar and pound a few beers before I get on this flight where I'm going to inevitably order more drinks, like it just got to the point where there were no lines, and they were completely all blurred. It was like, well, if I just spent the last 24 hours partying or whatever, why not just keep drinking? I'm about to be on a flight for like 4 hours, what's the shame in that? So, yeah, it just kind of became one of those things where, it was just no longer fun, essentially. I had some pretty dark moments, and it I basically kind of had to give myself an ultimatum. Like, am I going to do this for the rest of my life, or am I going to do this until I end up in jail, or am I going to do this until I end up dead? It just, I had some wake up calls, and there were some, things that I did that I just, almost couldn't comprehend. And, things got pretty ugly in my personal life. It was just affecting almost every aspect of my life. So it was one of those things that I basically just I went too hard. So my combo of choice was alcohol and cocaine. And those two together, you feel like a fucking superhero.
Yeah.
You probably end up looking like a dickhead, but you feel pretty great. So that made it real easy to go on a 2 or 3 day bender, or just make a whole weekend out of whatever. And eventually it just, I started feeling god awful. I was depressed as fuck. It was, like I said, it was basically just affecting every aspect of my life. So yeah, things came to a head. I basically had to make a decision. Do I want to continue on like this, or do I need to, or do I want to, make a better life for myself, and a better life for, those around me. So,
do you think that it had both your sobriety and your alcoholism? Do you think that when you were drinking, it was a reflection of your dad, and when you quit drinking, it was trying to better yourself because of that?
Yeah, definitely. So in kind of on the inside, I was well, holy shit, I'm basically just a spitting image of my father, and that's fucking whack. My dad had a pretty rough go at his battle with addiction. There were years of his life where he got sober, and he was, active in his recovery. And, I watched my dad, walk in and out of the program probably a dozen times. And whenever he was sober, he was the best dad he could ever be. Even when he was drinking, he was an amazing father to me. I don't have any terrible memories of my dad.
Right.
But
it killed him.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's definitely a motivator in my sobriety. I definitely don't want to kind of follow in his footsteps. So it's definitely one of those things where that's a big motivator for me. So
yeah, man, that's a powerful story. So for you, you said that your dad walked in and out of a program. Is that AA?
Yeah, he was an Alcoholics Anonymous guy. Early in my sobriety, I was definitely attending some Alcoholics Anonymous meetings. And while I've seen that program do wonders for people, I kind of realized that there were some ideals involved with the program that I couldn't necessarily subscribe to.
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't like the higher power thing. It wasn't, making amends or anything like that. I think the 12 steps can be really, really beneficial to anybody who's trying to recover from anything, whether that's food or sex or gambling or alcohol or drugs or whatever. But the idea of like a label, such as like alcoholic,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see that as like a positive means for recovery.
Yeah.
While I see like the benefit in like being able to subscribe to a community by giving yourself a label and like being a part of something such as a program, like a recovery program like AA, I don't see it as like a means for progress in one's life. Like, so I read a book like early in my sobriety. It's called This Naked Mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's by an author called Annie Grace. And basically this book is, I don't know if you're familiar with Alan Carr. He wrote a book. It's about how to stop smoking the easy way. And he basically just talks about how gross and disgusting it is like throughout the whole book. And he like encourages you to keep smoking through it. He basically just lays out all the facts. And that's what Annie Grace does in her book, is she really kind of diminishes all like the appeal of alcohol. And she kind of really tears it down for what it is, which is a category 1 carcinogen, alcohol or ethanol, that is, toxic to the body. And she kind of tears down like all of the marketing that alcohol companies use. And she talks about how it's, something that's just like deeply ingrained into our sobriety. Excuse me.
Our society.
Yeah, it's deeply ingrained into our society. So she kind of has a point, and she's like, you don't have to be an alcoholic to be addicted to alcohol. And that kind of really stuck with me. Just, maybe you drink a little bit too much on occasion, or maybe you just totally overdo it every time you drink, or maybe you can't stop when you start drinking. Like you have one and you can't just have one, you have to have 10.
Yeah.
She kind of strips that back a little bit and kind of kills that notion that you have to be labeled something because you became addicted to a substance that's addictive. So I don't label myself as an alcoholic. I label myself as a person in long-term recovery. Mm-hmm. Because I think that's a much more positive way of saying, look, I became addicted to a substance that was addictive, and I am working, every day to free myself of those addictions. And so like I said, I went to AA in like my first 90 days of sobriety, and I learned some really great things there, and I'm forever grateful to the people inside those rooms. But eventually I kind of, I did do some smart recovery meetings, which focuses on cognitive behavioral therapy. And it really targets the why, like, and the, kind of the thought train, with things such as like urges or, why you want to drink, and things like that. So, smart recovery was a little bit of smart recovery was pretty helpful for me as well. And now I just kind of work my own program. I have kind of a daily routine that I do every day. And I'll usually start my day at about 6:30 in the morning. I get up, usually take a shower. I try to do yoga in the morning. It's not always that successful. Sometimes I wake up a little late, but I try to practice some yoga about twice a week. I also meditate as much as I can. Sometimes I can get, 3 or 4 sessions in a week. Other times I'll go 2 weeks without meditating, but that's really helped me to find, peace and, serenity within myself. I also, every day, this is kind of a non-negotiable for me, but every day I write out a few things that I did the day before, whether those were just tasks I needed to do, or goals I needed to achieve that I did achieve. I'll write a few things that I did the day before. And then I will write out a list of 5 to 10 things that I'm grateful for in that very moment. I try to follow it up with like a short journal entry, whether or not it's some deep life perspective shit or just how I'm feeling that morning. I try to knock out a paragraph of something in the morning. And after that, I just try to take some time to myself, whether it's 15 minutes or an hour, just drink some coffee and sit with the dog or watch the sunrise or whatever. So, yeah. And I find that helps me to kind of take me out of myself and kind of keep me in a place where I'm centered. So, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely, you know, like Alcoholics Anonymous didn't work for me. Or
Yeah.
For me, it was Narcotics Anonymous, I suppose, because I was a drug addict. But it was definitely a lot of what you're saying. But there was also some other things too. Like the higher power thing drove me crazy because I figure like if I can't say that I'm powerful, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I just don't see how I could have the power to quit, you know, and I don't like surrendering.
Yeah.
I'm not that kind of person. Like I can't surrender. I need to be the one that's in control. And that might be a crazy thing, like a control freak type thing, but
no, that's all addicts, man. Yeah,
right.
That's all addicts. Seriously.
Yeah.
I mean, we're control freaks. We like to run the show.
Yeah.
I think it has to another thing to do with like being an artist. Like we want to be in control. Like, and I mean, like there's passages in the big book about how the alcoholic wants to run the show. He wants to be the actor. He wants to run the lights. He wants to run the audio system. He wants to direct the show. He wants to make the costumes. I think that has a big part of that, you know? But I know what you're saying. Like, surrendering is hard. And calling yourself powerless is, I see that as counterintuitive, but at the same time, like, you know, I heard guys in the rooms be like, well, you know, you can go out and stand in front of a Mack truck while it's barreling at you at 50 miles an hour and you are powerless to stop that truck. And, you know, I was like, well, that's true. I totally understand that. Like, you know,
but I don't know like that. I have also heard those in the room because I've been to plenty of those meetings, you know, and I've heard stuff like that. Like, you can get struck by lightning and you're powerless to lightning or something. And that's, you know, and it's like, okay, but I'm not powerless to my, like, I don't know. I actually don't really believe in free will. So I guess that's kind of like a whole nother topic, but,
definitely.
but so I guess maybe I am powerless, but I do, I just like, man, once you have an addiction, like alcohol or meth or whatever, like, once you do it and you choose to like do it for yourself, you know, and like for me, it's funny. I just was talking about this to somebody like before we started the podcast. Like for me, what I had to do to quit using was I set up all these things that I call like relapse roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
And I just made my life, I constructed a life that I couldn't relapse. I like put all these things, I mean, I could, but I put all these things in front of my relapse where it was like, you know, it was like the nuclear fucking codes, you know, you have this to bypass, then you have this to bypass, then you have this, and then you have this. And then if you bypass all of those things and you choose to relapse, like you might as well just kill yourself. Cause you know what I mean? It's like, there's too many, you have too many things that are in the way. And it was like, I got a dog and I took my dog everywhere with me. And that was like a huge thing, you know?
Absolutely.
And then I was honest with my wife finally, and she knew. So it was
they often do.
Yeah. Once it's out there, you know, it's pretty hard to hide it. So then, and, you know, like, and then I like the crazy things that I think were like the biggest for me was exercise and diet,
Yeah.
because I made it so that I had like goals with that stuff where it was like, okay, if I smoke meth, then I'm not going to eat. If I'm not going to eat, then I'm not going to get nutrients, which means that I won't ever achieve like this weight that I'm trying to hit in the gym.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like just like these weird things like that. And if I don't rest, then this and like at the end of the day, if it's like you said earlier, you ask yourself, is this what I'm gonna do for the rest of my life? Is this what I'm gonna do until I die? You know?
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody that's addicted to anything can look at their future and say, this is what I want to do until I die.
Yeah.
And if they do say that, they're lying to themselves.
Yeah.
And if you don't have the notion that this is what you want to do until you die, then it's might as well just quit now, because you're going to have to deal with it eventually. You just have to. If you really aren't going to do it until you die, you're going to have to deal with it eventually.
Definitely.
And if you don't deal with it now, it's just going to be that much harder the next day and the next day and the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it like I said, it came to a head to me, or for me, in my situation where it was like, I had to face the music. Like I had to make a decision. And those early days were real fucking hard.
Yeah.
Especially just like going back to like being in the community that we're in, you know, like I had gigs I had to play, and like some of the first few gigs that I had, you know, where I was sober were really fucking hard. And at the same time, like, you know, not having those 3 or 4 drinks before I would get on stage, you know, I was like sweating my ass off, like kind of white knuckling it until I finally like stepped up to, you know, the CDJs, and like I played 2 or 3 tunes, and it was like I didn't need the alcohol.
Right.
The alcohol was not what made that fun. It was obviously, you know, playing music for people. And it really made me rediscover why I was doing this in the first place. Was because I fucking love music. I love sound design. I love sound systems, and I love being able to, you know, project frequencies through fucking speakers and have that impact other people's emotions on the dance floor, you know, like, and that's like, you know, what drives me 100%. And it's what drives me. It's what, you know, started this whole thing for me. It was like, you know, being able to connect with people in a sense, you know, through music, you know, in that club or festival setting, you know, through a DJ set. So yeah. Yeah, I think with, you know, like things like whether you want to call it alcoholism or addiction to alcohol or drugs, within, you know, the music community, you know, it's not really a subject that a lot of people talk about. There are artists who are, you know, active in recovery, and, you know, they're not really open about their recovery because they think it's going to affect how, you know, their followers or their fans or their, you know, whoever, the rest of the scene is going to view them, you know? And I've kind of struggled that myself. You know, I had to make a conscious decision. Like, do I want to be open about, you know, my recovery and, you know, my struggles in the past, you know, to a community of people that, you know,
are struggling right now, maybe.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Like, that's the thing, man. It is, I totally understand where you're coming from, because I've been there. I used to also, you know, be a promoter and stuff. And before I got into meth, I was into other things like coke or whatever.
Yeah.
And back then I always struggled with it. So I would get sober and try to, it was the same thing. It was like, I always felt like whenever I'd go out, people would bust drugs out or whatever. And then they'd have this thing where it's like, oh, sorry. And it's like, I don't give a fuck what you're doing, you know?
Exactly.
And you have to make your own decision.
Right.
But it was always amazing to me. Like a lot of times I would book artists that were like, I'm not going to name any names, obviously, but I would book artists, and they would come into town, and all of a sudden the coke would start flying and stuff like that. And beforehand, like, I mean, this happened numerous times where someone would tell me, okay, I'm not going to drink tonight. I'm not going to do coke tonight. I'm trying not to do coke. I'm trying not to, they would tell me this.
Yeah.
And then it's like they started drinking a little bit during their set because they get nervous, just like what you're talking about.
Yep.
And then the coke comes out.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many times an artist looked at me before he about was going to hit the bullet or something. And I was like, just remember, it's all downhill from here, like you're not doing what your path is, like what you're trying to do. And then they would do that. Like they would make that conscious decision, maybe because they were afraid of disappointing, in quotation marks, me, or whatever it is, but maybe because they were afraid of being judged by me. I don't really care.
Yeah.
They would make that decision not to do it. And then the next day I would always hear from them, about how they're so glad that they didn't do it. And you know what, dude, like I have had plenty of amazing times on drugs, plenty of amazing times on alcohol.
Absolutely. Me too.
Yeah. And it's like, not everybody is in that point that we're talking about, you know? So like, I think that should be made clear, but there is a point when you do get to that and it's not serving you anymore and you need to move on and reflect on that, and having people that are willing to talk about it like this, where, you're not afraid of saying, you know what, I'm good. I don't drink. Have fun. Like instead of on my rider, instead of having champagne, I'm going to have kombucha, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
That's actually what my wife and I did forever. We'd have coconut water and kombucha on our riders,
Oh yeah.
And it's like, that just making that decision it's like those little tiny seeds that get planted, like
definitely,
and they're important seeds. And maybe it's not, maybe only 1 out of every 10 people are going to have that seed planted where it's going to grow into something for themselves later on. But it happens all the time. And there needs to be artists like you that are willing to talk about this and not be ashamed of it. And if you lose fans or promoters that feel uncomfortable booking you, fuck them. You know what I mean? Like they're for the wrong reasons,
Yeah, no, and I don't really worry about that.
I know you don't. I'm more so talking to the audience with that one.
Oh, for sure. And whether it's like other artists or people within, like the dance music community, the one thing I struggled with early on was like, well, fuck, like I felt like alone, Yeah. And I as wide open and as accessible and available as recovery is, sometimes you just don't fucking see it because either you're trapped in your own shit or you're so stuck in your own head that you don't even really like think of it as like an option. And I was talking about this last night with my fiance, and I was like, like nobody wants to. I don't know. It's hard to say, but as long as like whatever you're doing is working for you, that's great. Especially within like sobriety or like recovery or wellness or whatever. But like I used to kind of see like those people, whether they were artists or professional athletes or whatever, who like got sober and they're like, fuck yeah, man, like I drank in like 3 months and I'm like, I go to church every day and like I'm just so fucking grateful for my life. And like, they're just like high on recovery. And like, I used to think that was so fucking corny. And I was like, oh great, that's ridiculous. Like nobody can be that happy or like that grateful or like that at peace in their life to where they're like so ecstatic. Like it's almost like fanatical, And don't get me wrong, like I wake up every day and I'm grateful to be alive. And I'm
preach it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, well, and it just, if that's what you have to do to like get through your day and you're still sober at the end of the day, then fucking do that. Like, I'm all about it. But
yeah, I think part of the problem with that though, I mean, this is just my opinion, is part of the problem with that is that you're creating an identity for yourself. So when you slip up, your identity breaks and then you feel lost again.
Yeah, and you actually see that a lot, like within like the recovery world. Like,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
there's a podcast called Dopey, and it's these two former opiate addicts who would just talk about like their war stories, like with their addictions, and um, sadly, one of them relapsed and overdosed and died. And it's not always like you know it's not always fucking sunshine and rainbows. Like every day you have to make an effort to um, be your best self and find what works for you. And yeah, it's not always like I said, sunshine and rainbows. But I do make an effort to be open about my struggles and my progress in recovery, in efforts to help others, whether they are artists or fans or dancers or painters or whatever. I think it's important for people to know that they're not alone, in what they're struggling with. So yeah, I think that's an important thing to me. And I think it's something I'll continue to do, because personally I wish that there was maybe an artist or just even somebody within my community who was open about their struggles, so I could maybe talk to them and like try and get some advice, or just hear something that would maybe lead me to the good water. So yeah, I think that's the main motivator of why I'm open.
Yeah,
I like to be real as well and authentic. So
yeah. I think, well, I just think that part of being real and authentic, though, is not identifying. Like, this is just me. I can't stand identity politics. And the reason why, just for me, this is my personal, like, total anecdotal experience. But
yeah.
I used to be a vegan,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like the preachy, crazy vegans that were like, my wife and I both were just like,
look at this pig in the farm. Like,
yeah, totally. And then I got Crohn's disease, and
oh, fuck, man.
and I mean, like, it just tore me apart. And I went and I saw this amazing naturopathic type of doctor. I don't even want to call him that, but
real holistic.
Kind of, but it's not even like he was like a health coach. He wasn't really like a doc. He wasn't like a naturopathic doctor. He wasn't selling tinctures or fucking sage or anything.
Snake oil. Yeah.
Right. So, but he was like a health coach, I guess. And he just kind of was like, dude, you need to start drinking bone broth. You need to start eating meat. Like, you need to do these because, as I'm sure you're aware, a lot of vegan products are terrible. And also they're, heavily processed, but even if you're just eating plant-based diets, like, you're not getting omega-3s, and there's like all these important nutrient profiles that you're missing out on. Even if you're like really conscious about that stuff, a lot of nutrient profiles from being vegan, you cannot absorb without pairing it with meat. It's just like, we have evolved eating meat. And so for me, like, I was in this, like, I had this identity built up, of this like vegan warrior. And
right.
And then it was like, I finally made the decision. I was like, okay, I'm going to try eating meat again for my health.
Yeah.
And as soon as I started eating meat again, all of my symptoms started going away.
Wow.
And and it was like, and now I still have Crohn's. I still have flares occasionally, but as soon as I tighten up my diet, they go away right away, and
definitely.
It's unfortunate that we consume animals, but it's just like the way it is, and I guess my long fucking story, and the point to that is that I had this identity built up as a vegan, and then when I stopped being a vegan, I was like embarrassed. I couldn't tell people. I like tried to hide it for a while, and then I got to this point where I was like, you know what, fuck that, I am me. I don't give a fuck what anybody says.
Right.
And the problem with like the sobriety thing sometimes, and obviously this is not directed towards you at all, but it could be directed towards me. I don't know. But the problem with like identifying as sobriety is that if you ever fuck up, you're going to kill yourself, just bash yourself for it. and that's a terrible place to be too.
Yeah.
And I just like, I am very, very, very vocal about my drug use and my recovery as well. And I'm here for anybody that wants to hear it. And I definitely like, you know, I've recorded podcasts on, I do another podcast, you know, called Mind Melt Podcast. And that podcast is more discussion based. And I've done like an entire episode talking about the crazy shit that I went through as a meth addict.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, man, it's like, it's really important that people do what they can to better themselves at all time.
Yeah.
And if you fall off that betterment, you fuck up on your diet or you do something else, like that's just who you are that in that moment. And the next moment you can be back to being yourself, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I don't know. That was kind of a long-winded thing, but I just, identity politics scare the shit out of me.
No, I totally understand what you mean, man. And that was like kind of a concern. Like when I was trying to make a decision on whether or not I was going to be open about this, if I was going to keep this as a facet of my personal life, or if I was going to maybe try and, you know, use this to maybe help others come to a conclusion on whether or not they have an issue, or, you know, what, you know, safe use is for them, or, you know, things like that. And I've had dozens of people contact me. I've had, you know, just a couple friends or a couple people this weekend be like, hey man, like I'm also kind of starting my, you know, kind of sober journey. Would you ever be down to just like chat? Like if, you know, things get hairy for me, and I'm, of course, you know, like, and to anybody listening to this, like my line is always open. I don't care if I know you or not. If things get hairy or whatever, you can always contact me in whatever way you need to. But
have you ever thought about doing a podcast?
I actually have, yeah. And that's kind of a similar, that's kind of on the ideas list for the next like year or so, with the full-time RV living thing.
Yeah.
And this kind of ties in with what I was about to say, is like health and wellness is like a huge part of how I feel that my recovery benefits me. You know, granted, I'm not always awesome about it, but I try to eat a really healthy diet, well balanced, and like, you know, I don't eat dairy anymore. I try not to eat very many like starchy veggies or like lots of carbs, or you know, sugar is like my next drug of choice. When I stopped drinking, I went through a 5-pound bag of gummy worms in like a week.
Man, when I quit doing meth, I would remember waking up in the middle of the night, going to the freezer and just eating
Smashing ice cream.
Yeah, dude.
So I've recently switched to like Halo Top ice cream because it's dairy free. And it only has like 7 grams of sugar in it, as opposed to like the 29, or like, dude, I used to go down and get a milkshake every night from the corner store. Had 61 grams of fucking sugar in it.
Yeah.
Like,
dude,
like,
have you ever
ridiculous.
Have you ever thought about going keto?
Not necessarily. I've seen like the benefits of like a ketogenic diet, like for friends, or of friends that I have. And like,
well, have you ever read studies though? Cause like I used to be totally skeptical, and
I've heard.
I'm in ketosis, and I have been for a while, but like I was always really skeptical about it because I thought it was just like a fad diet, but there's like real science behind it, and like being in a fasted state. The benefit of it for me, this is just for me, is I'm a total sugar addict, and when I'm in ketosis, I never crave sugar ever.
That's crazy.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's you clear your body of it, and your body learns to use a different energy source as fuel.
Right.
Do you understand it? Like what the difference is between?
I do understand the premise. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So like, I mean, dude, it takes it actually, it's kind of like getting off of opiates. Like when you first get into ketosis, your body like stops burning like glycogen for energy.
Yeah.
And
you get
like,
all weak and lethargic and shit.
Well, yeah, for like 3 or 4 days. And then, and your brain, it's just because your body doesn't know actually like how to use ketones as energy yet. And like, you know, like in hunter gathering days, you used to fast all the time because you didn't have food.
Yeah.
And so you would have to be burning ketones. And so your body has this like system that is basically like, it's really cool because it has this system of like storing energy so that you don't have to carry energy with you everywhere you go.
Mm-hmm.
And now we do have energy wherever we go. We can go to the
Right.
store and get energy. So that's
Exactly.
like food is energy. So the problem with that though is that our bodies also, like, because we're, you know, like I don't like using the term design, but because we're through evolution have become adapted to burn or to store energy. Our bodies always prefer carbs because it burns quicker, you know?
Yeah.
But like once your fucking brain or your body switches over to like not doing the carb thing anymore and just burns ketones, like I never crave carbs and I never crave unhealthy food.
Yeah.
Ever. It's insane. Like, and I'm not just saying that. Like,
no, definitely.
You know,
and I've found that like just with like on the basis of like habits. So like, if I eat shitty for a week and I'm eating burgers and pizzas and tacos and burritos and all this shit, I will go back to eating healthy, and those first 3 or 4 days are fucking torture. I just want grease and cheese and fat and you know, and those first like 7 or 8 meals of like healthy food are like, God, this sucks. Like fucking vegetables and greens and, you know, no sauce or cheese or fats or anything like that. Like it's the worst. But on meal number 9 or 10, you're like, oh shit, like now I feel amazing and this tastes good. And I know that I should be eating this. And it's kind of like, okay, well the habit is starting to kick in and you no longer crave those shitty foods. So I totally get what you're saying, like about ketosis. I'm glad that that's something that works for you. I've never really flirted with the idea of doing like a ketogenic diet, but have
you ever flirted with the idea of doing intermittent fasting?
Not necessarily. My fiance and I, we try to focus on eating like a paleo diet for the most part.
Yeah, that's what I do like 80% of the year.
Yeah, definitely. And like, you know, just like well-rounded portions of, you know, vegetables and meat and, you know, healthy greens and good fats and good oils. And, you know, that tends to work out for us pretty well.
Have you ever read any books by Chris Kresser? Have you ever heard of Chris Kresser?
Not familiar.
Oh man, you have got to read one of his books. Like he wrote a book called Your Personal Paleo Code. Mm-hmm. And, he's written a couple books, but that one's like the one that I haven't read. But if you're into health and wellness, dude, you will geek out over this book. And it's not about keto or anything like that. Like it's called Your Personal Paleo Code, but it's not like, it's not the thing about the keto diet. First of all, it's fad as fuck right now. And so that's annoying because I don't even like talking about it with people. Like this is probably
just like the paleo diet was like 3 years ago. Like,
right. Exactly.
I mean, it spawned the whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And the thing is, just like the paleo diet, there's like the healthy keto diet and there's the unhealthy keto diet. And the unhealthy keto diet is the bacon and the yellow fucking Dairy Gold cheese.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, and so there is that, and that is disgusting. And I can't believe people would torture their bodies like that. I mean, the bacon that some of these people fucking eat is like just nitrates and all this shit, you know?
Yeah, sodium.
Right. And so, but if you do it like the way that, I'm not saying that I'm like the right way or whatever, but if you do it the way that I do it, it's basically paleo without carbs. You know what I'm saying? So, and I only do it part of the year. And the only reason I do it part of the year is because all what happens is I'll be doing like perfect paleo for a while. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'll have like ice cream. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'll have ice cream tonight too. And then I'll have ice cream and potatoes and then French fries. And then all of a sudden I'm fucking eating, you know, like healthy candy or whatever.
Right.
And it's just, and then I'm like, okay, time to go keto because it totally just clears me of all that shit. And then I can kind of go back through my shitty cycle again.
Definitely. So yeah, it's like definitely health and wellness is another like essential portion of like my recovery and like it's just something good to focus on, like in general.
What else do you do for health and wellness, like besides diet?
So I walk like a fair amount. Like I try to get out, and like Portland is just like, I mean, there are tons of parks here, and there's miles and miles of coastline on the Oregon coast, and like, there are waterfalls everywhere and hikes galore. So I try to get out as much as I can. It's not as often as I like to, but so I try to just like remain active as much as possible. I also like walk like a total of like 1.5 miles a day. So like with work, my commute to work, and like taking the bus, I end up walking a fair amount too. So yeah, like being somewhat physical, like, and like I said, like with yoga or, doing like kettlebell swings at home, or like, I'm not like out here getting swole, but
do you ever run?
I've thought about getting back into running. I used to run when I was in high school and stuff, but I just saw this article the other day, and this is like, like coffee is the best thing ever for you, or like coffee is the worst ever for you.
Yeah.
There's an article on every, viewpoint, and it's all backed by science and stuff. But I saw this article yesterday. It was like running is like the least effective, like, or like like the least beneficial form of exercise for you. I just thought that was kind of funny.
I don't know, man. I think that like I agree with you. There's like all these different articles and stuff like that. But like if you're into paleo diets, I mean, what is your reason? I know that phrase right there sounds so stupid. If you're in a paleo diet, but what's your reasoning behind choosing to eat kind of paleo? Is it because
I just feel great like when I eat right. Like, okay. And that's like that factors into the recovery thing. Like if I feel good, it kind of like, so when you stop
for your day.
Well, yeah. And I mean, like if you're getting good energy throughout the day, and granted, I still get that like, low blood sugar after a meal or whatever. But like, if you feel good, that's like super important, and it's super important to me. So, I just try to like, try to feel good as naturally as possible. I think a well-balanced diet also helps, and there's science behind this, but a well-balanced diet will also help with, the way that your brain trades its chemicals, and the way that your endorphins are produced and things like that. So,
Absolutely.
It's, there's a lot of science behind gut health and, brain chemistry, that we're starting to see a lot more of, with published, research-based articles and things like that. But so just like end all be all, I just feel better when I eat better. So, cool. And feeling good is like a very good thing. So that's kind of why I do that. So,
well,
yeah.
What I was kind of hinting at was that, I mean, I would say it's just opinion, but I would say it's very, very fucking backed up by science. But for, hundreds of thousands, millions, maybe of years, we were eating a pretty, like, there was no fucking added sugar that's been taken from this. And then there was no nitrates, and there was no added this for storage. And there was, you know what I'm saying? So there wasn't all this bullshit in our diets. And now, there obviously is. And we also see a huge rise in gut problems and inflammation-based diseases. And I think that has a lot to do with, I mean, for one, our soil isn't nutrient dense like it used to be, right? And then
it's because the plants need electrolytes.
Right. But also, I mean, but also like the cows need to eat what cows are supposed to eat, just like we should be eating what we're supposed to be eating.
And if we're going to eat them,
cows, then they need to have nutrients because we need nutrients from them. And it's like this fucking cycle, right?
Yep.
But basically that's how it was for thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years. And so I try to like base a lot of my activity aside from my job, unfortunately, because there's no way to get around that. But I try to base a lot of my life around what people did back then, in a way, like, so it's like people back then probably ran occasionally, and it probably wasn't 10 miles in a competition. You know,
Yeah,
it was
right.
probably like, so when I go to the gym, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll do like, I'll run 1 mile at, you know, like a jog. I'll run 2 miles at like a sprint, and then
Yeah.
I'll kind of like coast 1, and then like sprint 3, or not sprint, but like run fast 3 or something like that. And
Yeah.
just like do all these weird like variations, you know, and because that's kind of like the paleo version of running.
Yeah,
You know what
definitely.
I'm saying?
It's
Like,
almost like high intensity interval training.
yeah,
almost.
hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. That's what I was trying to get at, though, is like, and this is part of my recovery too. Like when I was talking about how I put all these like roadblocks up.
Yeah.
Like, part of that was just like, once I also took a bunch of neuroscience classes, and that was like crucial for me.
Yeah.
Because once I understood like why my brain was dependent on these chemicals, I could like neurohack myself.
Yeah.
You know, and like figure out how to get all these dopamine boosts and get my brain cognition to work like without faking it.
Yeah.
You know? And
Exactly.
yeah. And it's cool, man. So that's another thing. Like, I think that it's really cool that you're doing, because I agree with you. Health and wellness was definitely my saving grace with all that stuff. I mean, could you imagine, like, you as a recovering addict or whatever you want to call yourself, you as a recovering person, could you imagine trying to do that while eating fast food and just being stagnant and laying in bed all day or something, you know?
You know, I don't, here's the thing. Like, I never imagined myself like doing yoga or like meditating or like making gratitude lists every fucking day.
Right.
I never ever imagined that. Like when I woke up on day one, like on my fucking couch, I didn't ever imagine that I would wake up in 8 months and be like, oh damn, like I'm grateful to have 2 eyes, two arms, you know, 2 legs, 2 feet, and, you know, a nose today. But I am. And, you know, it's just, I'm doing some of the things that I never ever thought that I would be doing. And like, you know, transitioning this lifestyle into like living in an RV full time and traveling, you know, North America, like didn't even fucking occur to me. So like entering into a state of recovery, and making like the most diligent effort to improve my life every single day. Not to get on like the whole self-help train or like any of that, because I mean, that can be helpful for a lot of people, but a lot of it is like woo-woo bullshit sometimes. But
yeah, whatever works, man.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I was about to say. That's what I was about to say is whatever helps you get through the day. And whether or not you're struggling with, like I said, with food or sex or gambling, whatever helps you abstain and live a better life, I'm all for it, you know? As long as it's not like even more damaging to you, then, you know,
right.
what's the shame in it, you know? So
I know, man, it's crazy. Like I just think it's really funny too, because I don't know if you saw my post recently about that Dr. Carl Hart thing. Did you see that? Okay, so do you know who he is, Dr. Carl Hart?
No.
Okay, so he's a famous
we're gonna have to trade like a book list.
Dude, I will let you log into my Audible, and I've got
sick.
Yeah, you can just steal them all from me.
Nice.
I've got $500 worth of gangster ass books on there. So, well, this guy, Dr. Carl Hart, though, I don't like him, not to be a douche, but I just don't. I think his message is extremely dangerous, and he's like this famous doctor that is basically like, you know, you can do heroin every day and not be an addict, is like his whole thing. Like, you can do meth every day and not be an addict, right? And so his claim is that an addict is someone who can't function in society because of the drug. And to me, that is so dumb, because like, you know, like, okay, if I did Adderall every day, I would function wonderfully through society. I'd be miserable.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just would be, because it wouldn't be me. But I mean, I could fake it and pretend like I'm happy and function and pay all my bills and work twice as hard as normal, maybe even be more successful than I would be without it, right?
Yeah.
But to me, you're still an addict.
Right.
You know, and it's like with heroin, for example, like how do you determine what addiction is? Like if your body is physically dependent upon something where if you don't have it tomorrow, you would potentially end up in the hospital
Yeah.
with, you know, isn't that an addiction? So if
Right.
you do heroin every day for 5 years and then all of a sudden you quit because you're like, oh, well, I'm not technically an addict. Like,
yeah, like you could die.
good luck. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Good luck.
Yeah.
Right? So anyways, I just, it's like, it's really weird because I have a lot of friends that are like that. I posted this thing about he has an article that's like methamphetamine is the same as Adderall. And so I posted this like big post about how like scientifically it's just not true, you know.
Right.
Like methamphetamine is a neurotoxic chemical that when smoked it goes into your brain like 5 times more dopamine is, you know, like
Really?
I posted
Yeah.
all these like scholarly articles that talked about the differences between what meth does to the brain, what Adderall does to the brain. Like I posted all these journals, like real journals, not like fake journals.
Yeah.
And he's basing this off of a 5-day study that he did. And I'm just like, you know what I mean? And so anyway, so I posted this thing and it was like everybody on my post was like beating me up about how, well, you know, like sugar can be addictive and people do that every day. And I'm like, yeah, people shouldn't, you know, like that's, I guess, the thing is with addictions is like I become addicted to stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Like exercise, like I'll become addicted to exercise where I need to take a break from exercise. It's just that my body would easily rather take a break from exercise than take a break from Adderall or something.
Yeah, definitely.
You know?
Well, and it's like, it goes to show that like everybody has something, right?
Right. Yeah.
And it's kind of down to like a social stigma. So, you know, obviously like sugar has been, and that's again a whole nother topic, but like sugar is accepted, you know, by, you know, the general population. Like it's just the fact of life.
Right.
The same could be said for alcohol. You know, so it's kind of about like where the context lies for that person and, you know, where it is affecting their life or, you know, so. And
the thing is with those addictions too, that is, and this is like one of the points I was trying to get across to a couple of my friends on the post was like you can operate your, if his version of what an addiction is true, then you can eat sugar, overconsume sugar every single day, still perform your job duties, still pay your bills, all that stuff. But maybe 20 years from now you get diabetes.
Right.
You know, and so that's why it's important to realize that just because you're able to cope with something and consume it doesn't mean that it's healthy or it's okay or anything like that. Like you should hold yourself to a higher standard. If you overeat fast food, like you might die from a heart attack in 20 years. You're not going to notice the effects right away, but it's like, you know, addictions, no matter what they are, will kill you, no matter how publicly accepted they are, you know what I mean? Like, and so I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm just rambling now, but
Dude, So the whole recovery thing can kind of be a rabbit hole. So I totally understand. I mean, there's so many different sides to this. And I guess if there's anything I'll say about it, like it's really about what works best for you. And like, that's, you know, if you find yourself, you know, wanting to subscribe to a program, like a 12-step program, and that works for you, then fucking do that. And drink that Kool-Aid if it helps you, you know? And
just as long as like you're being honest with yourself through the process.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. You know, and if a recovery program isn't for you, and you are just better by, abstaining and, you know, doing your own thing, like, then do that as long as it works for you, you know? So, you know, whatever works is kind of my attitude towards it. You know, so I think that's something. It's a really big takeaway for me, anyways. So
yeah. Well, shit, Ben, I'm so stoked that we got to talk about this, man.
Yeah, definitely. You know, it's not a subject that comes up a lot. You know, in this kind of scene. You know, mental illness comes up a lot, but you know, it's
what's the mental illness because of sometimes. You know, it's like
exactly.
Yeah, is it the chicken or the egg? Because
that's exactly right. Yeah, is it the symptom or the cure? You know, like, yeah, it's definitely two sides of that coin. But
Well, listen, I would just want you to shout out, plug your stuff, like where people can find you, and your SoundCloud, Facebook, all that stuff.
yeah, so you can listen to the tunes on pretty much any major streaming service. SoundCloud is soundcloud.com/Sigrah. That's Sigrah. You can hit me on Instagram at Sigrah Music, Twitter at Sigrah Music, Facebook at Sigrah Music. Yeah, so
awesome. Well, hang out with me for a second. People are
Yeah,
gonna check out your mix, and I just hang out. I'm gonna pause this.
kinda dripping off the meat grinder. Heat niner, pimping, stripping, soft, sweet minor. China was a neat sign of trouble with the script digits. Double dip, bubble lip, subtle lisp, midget. Borderline schizo, sorta fine tits though. Porter wine, order grind, 8:45, let's go. Ever since 10-11, glad she made a brethren. Then his last down, 7 alligator, 7 at the gates of heaven, knocking, no answer. Slow dancer, hopeless romancer, dopest flow stanzas. Yes, no, villain, metal face to destro. Guess so, still incredible in escrow. Just say ho, I'll test the yayo. Wild West style fest, y'all best to lay low. Hey bro, day glow, set the bet, pay dough. Before the cheddar get away, best to get Mako. The worst hated god and perpetrated odd favors demonstrated in the perforated rod lavers. In all quad flavors, large savers. Still back in the game like Jack LaLanne. Think you know the name, don't rack your brain. On a fast track to half sane, either in a slow beat or that the speed or at the cane. Laughter, pain, doing songs lit in the booth with the best host, doing bong hits on the roof in the West Coast. He's at it again, mad at the pen, glad that we win. A tad fat in a bad hat for men. Grind the cinnamon, Manhattan warmongers. You can find the villain in satin, gongas. The van screeches, the old man preaches about the gold sand beaches. The cold hand reaches for the old fan Elises.
bridges, but made of bridges I burned. Light the way.